Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Township of Union is being held pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Law, C-231 Laws of New Jersey, dated 1975. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the local source as well as the Star Ledger, the newspapers of record, and notice has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building adjacent to the municipal clerk's office. Roll call, Mr. Manguso.
Mr. DiGiovanni is absent. Mr. Howe is absent. Mr. Wiley.
Here.
Miss Alexander.
Here.
Miss Martins.
Here.
Mr. Bentavegina.
Here.
Miss Scott.
Here.
Mr. McNeil.
Here.
And Mr. Champy.
Here. There are present. This meeting is now declared open. At this time, I'd like to entertain for a motion for the approval of the March 30th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the meeting minutes of March 30th, 2022 be approved as written.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Mr. Manguso, are there any communications this evening?
There are no communications.
Thank you. Before we proceed with the meeting, I have two announcements. Number one, I want to welcome the public as well as all the board members back. We've been using Zoom meetings since, I guess, May of 2020. We haven't met in person since March of 2020, which is about 25 months. So I welcome everybody back. Number two, we had a vacancy in the board, second alternate, and it was filled this evening with Mr. Ricardo McNeil. I'd like to welcome Mr. McNeil to the board, and I speak for myself and the other board members. We look forward to working with you. Thank you. And welcome aboard. And Miss Melody Scott is now alternate number one. So our first order of business this evening is the approval of a resolution for calendar number 3394, Maxon Hyundai Incorporated, located at 2329 Route 22 West and 1010 Gelb Street, Block 3210, lots 2.01 and 5. It's an automobile dealership, parts, and service. You've all had a chance to read the resolution. Are there any board members who would like to comment or make changes or modifications to the resolution at this time? Hearing none, may I have a motion for the approval of the resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the resolution as read and modified as accurately memorializing the previous findings of this board.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Wiley.
Yes.
Miss Alexander.
Yes.
Miss Martins.
Yes.
Mr. Bentavegina.
Yes.
Miss Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Champy.
Yes. All right. Proceeding with the meeting, our second order of business this evening is calendar number 3386, RHS Hospitality 1, LLC, located at 1252 Stuyvesant Avenue, Block 5208, Lot 22, the addition of covered outdoor patio structure. And this is carried for a continued hearing. Mr. Hale, would you like to begin?
Yes, good evening, and it's great to see everyone in person. I guess I've been seeing you for a couple of years on Wednesday nights virtually, and it really is great to be here and see everyone. And welcome and appreciate your service to the township, to all of you. And you did note that this is a continued hearing. I did discuss with Mr. Pansola that because since the original hearing probably a year ago, we've not only acquired additional properties for parking, but also addressed items. So what we're planning on doing is, in essence, to start over. Therefore, the members that were not at the previous meetings don't have to go back and look at the transcripts or watch the video or tape of whatever is at. So that's just by way of introduction. So, yes, we are here this evening for the Lager Restaurant to enclose, which is partially done, which was during COVID, have an outdoor semi-indoor-outdoor seating area. This has been a restaurant for many, many years. I remember as a kid, it was the Hofbrau House. We used to have our Cub Scout events there, that and the Blue Ribbon out on Morris Avenue. But it was, again, but it's great now, the revitalization and use of this. The parking always was very limited here. There were only a handful of parking spaces in front of, frankly, the Hofbrau House and then the later restaurant. And then during COVID, it certainly became very important, and my client, Mr. De Silva, will explain in more detail the importance of having that area. And then, again, since the time of the last application, by the way, we are permitted use. We're before this board for some C variances for parking and a number of existing conditions. But since the time of the last hearing, the applicant did gain control, not only, obviously, of the restaurant, but the mechanic facility next door for overflow parking during the evenings. And then across the street, there's a building that they also acquired. And under the township ordinance, as long as the parking was within 200 feet of the principal use, it can be considered as additional parking. So not only do we have the parking next to us, but now we have across the street too. Also very important was we had a meeting in December of last year with the neighbors. We sent out a notice and they came to the restaurant, met with Rodrigo, and we went through a number of conditions that I did a letter to the board outlining them, but there were some concerns raised by the residents, and some of it focused on where cars were parking, particularly up near High Street, near Stuyvesant, where they were having problems pulling out because they were blocking it. So we've been working with the police department. We're also going to address that. So there'll be striping. Again, acquiring the additional properties to provide extra off-street parking. I know everyone has Rodrigo's cell phone, so if there's someone that has a problem in the neighborhood, they can call up and get he or his assistant to address those. And if there is any type of special event, they would use valet parking and or call upon the Jobs in Blue to help assist if there's any issues. My understanding that since we've had that meeting, there haven't been any issues, and I know Mr. Rodriguez did reach out to the police department. I did also, and confirm that that has worked out well. So again, the area is limited to that front area, and will certainly, if approved, comply with any and all building code requirements. So what I'd like to do first is call upon Rodrigo De Silva, the representative of the restaurant, RHS Hospitality. I know that Mr. Pansula is going to want to mark the item.
Back live and in person,
Yes.
I was trying to figure out from the hybrid, from the virtual, to figure out where we are. We did previously mark A1, the application as it was submitted, and A2 was the 4-page site plan as it was presented. So since this is a continuation, technically, we'll keep that as such. A3 will be the 4-page revised site plan that you did submit. And as I was sitting, and I heard, and I do acknowledge that Mr. Hale did communicate to the board. It came late, but it is part of your packet, the summary of the meeting with the neighbors, which I think is important because I made the point at the original hearing. I know everybody wasn't here, but I'll make it as a part of this record. I assured the neighbors on the virtual call that when we continued that a lot of their concerns would be addressed. We're technically starting new, but what I want to do, Steve, is I'll mark A4, that written communication that you did submit and was made a part of the board members' packet tonight. So I think that it memorializes what Mr. Hale doesn't testify, he just summarizes, but the details of what he summarized are in that correspondence in the back of tonight's packet. And it has bullet points. There's many of them, including the no parking, striping, and signage that the police will work cooperatively with the applicant, the access of the manager or ownership to have cell phone access if there's problems in the area. So those are all positives, and I think they addressed a lot of the emails I know that I read as the board attorney from that prior meeting. So certainly the public tonight is here. You have the right to participate. We hope you do. But I want to make that point since this is kind of unique the way we did this. But I think since you're starting over, that's fine. But I just wanted the public to understand I was here, and I've noted that for the record. So all of those concerns will be filtered through this board tonight.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Pansula. All right, you're going to be sworn now. Wait. Did you?
There he is.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
You raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth.
Yes,
For the record, if you could spell your name with your business affiliation.
sure. I'm Rodrigo da Silva, Rodrigo da Silva, DASILVA, and I'm the owner of our Chess Hospitality One LLC.
And you were sworn on the first session that we did virtually, correct, and offered
Yes.
testimony?
Yes, I was.
And you're here again under oath.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Silva, first, if you could give a little background on the acquisition of the restaurant, a little history of your presence and position with the restaurant.
Yes, we bought the location in 2018. It was me plus 3 partners. It was 4 of us. And since then, I'm only partner now, which happened last year in August. I became sole proprietor and I bought their part in. But again, it was 4 of us. I was a minority partner. So there was a lot of the calls that was made in a database that wasn't really my call. But now that I'm fully owner of the place, and that was one of the things that I told the neighbors when we met, that now they can count on me. And again, like you mentioned, they do have my cell phone. They know who I am. I'm there all the time. And I'm there to be part of the neighborhood. I've been involved in, just a little background, in Union for many years. The Rio Rodizio Brazilian Steakhouse, I helped open that place. I was there for 17 years. And now, yes, so I've been involved in Union. My very first home was in Union. I own property in Union. This is home. You know what I mean? So I want to be part of the community more than ever. And I was very touched to have this moment with the neighbors, because some of the concerns they had, it was my concerns as well. For example, the main concern they had at the moment that we met was because that corner between High Street and Stuyvesant, people park too close to the corner. You don't have visibility to get, and it's very dangerous. And I feel that for me as well and for my staff. And that was one of the things that we were able to get away, the non-parking from High Street towards Stuyvesant. And now we know it's coming as well from Stuyvesant toward High Street. So that whole corner, they won't be able to park there, which gives the safety that we need. So that was a big win, and I felt like that was one of the main concerns that they had. And of course, the parking itself, that we're trying to work as much as we can together. That's why we're getting more parking and being very vigilant to make sure people don't park on the corner and things like that. That was a problem that happened in the past, and we want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Okay. And before we get to those, and I want to have you go through all the conditions, and you did see the letter that I wrote to the board. I just want to touch on all of those. But just a couple of things. Tell us a little bit about, I know you applied to the township and during, hopefully, lowering down the pandemic, but you applied for the outdoor dining area like many of the restaurants in Union and throughout the area did. So you obtained that, and then you implemented the outdoor area with the cover through a permit. Why is it important now that that be made a permanent part of the restaurant?
Yes, again, so those sittings outside, they've been there since 2018. What happened was we had those parking spots in front of the place when we first bought the place. And then back then, I talked to Mr. Anthony Mangusta, and I'm like, Anthony, how can I have some outside seating? And then back then, he was like, you need to give me a couple more parking spots, because otherwise, I understand, I want to help you out, but there's only so much I can do. And then we got the property next door. That's when we got the property next door where the mechanic is. And then I was able to put those tables outside. So those tables, they actually been there since 2018 and 2019 as well. So we didn't add any extra seating. But what happened was with COVID, we couldn't have indoor anymore. So what I saw was my guests, they were eating outside with those little plastic tents. And when it was rain, it would actually rain on their plates, and they're trying to go inside. And I'm like, by law, I couldn't have them inside of the building. It was a very tough situation that we saw ourselves. And then we applied for the structure outside, which I understand it was a temporary structure. And Mr. Anthony was kind enough to allow us to do it. And that's why now we wanted to make that permanent.
And again, with the pandemic slowly winding down, do you find the importance of having that area for your patrons, even when they now can go inside?
Yes, honestly, because first of all, we're still not over. You still hear about new variants starting in different countries and stuff. It's something that I don't think is going to be over overnight. And I still have people that email our website from Lagar, and they're like, oh, do you have heaters outside? And we don't, because we're not allowed to have the butane tanks outside, so we don't have heaters. But we tell them we don't. They're like, oh, still don't feel comfortable to sit inside. And we're talking about 2 years later. So yeah, I think it's very important. And at the same time, I think as far as for the township, I think as we go to have outside seating, and so, it's a nice evolvement, not just here in the whole state of New Jersey. I think it's something that we've been doing in Europe for so long, and it really adds up for people to give them that option. If you don't feel comfortable for some reason to be inside, you'll be more comfortable to be sitting outside in the open air, you know?
And then, as I mentioned in my opening, I know that the restaurant had very limited parking available since its inception, but you've now also acquired the property across the street to provide overflow parking if needed. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. So you own that and control that also?
yes.
Okay. Now, I want to touch on the neighbor meeting that we had, and I was there with you on December 6th of 2021. I know some of the residents that were there are here this evening. So I just want to touch on the list of items that you're committed to do. The first was which you talked about, the no parking areas where
In the corner.
and I know you're working with the police department, so you're committed to do that, and with the yellow striping, because I know when we were there, it isn't always visible. And you've also instructed your patrons or your staff in that regard?
Yes, yes, because of course, we cannot ourselves go and do any change. We've got to go to the proper channels. But what we can do is have our managers watch, and every time they see one of our customers park on that corner, they will go to explain to people they can. They will show them the sign, and we do everything that we can to make sure. And again, it's for our own safety, for all of us.
Okay. And then with respect to the parking ability across the street, if need be, you're committed to use, if you have a special event or a valet service for that area?
Yes, yes.
And then if need be, if you did have a larger event, you're committed to retain off-duty police officers, jobs in blue?
Yes.
Okay.
We honestly don't have that many big events like this. We might have a little wedding or something, but like it's usually small parties. But any time that we do any bigger event, if that was the case, that won't never be a problem. We go to the proper channels.
Okay. And then with respect to if music being played during the outdoor dining, you're committed to end that at 9 o'clock?
Yes, yes. It was good that we had this meeting in April last year, because then I had a whole summer to show our neighbors that I was serious about this change, and now it was only me and everything was, the change that was happening. And we had a whole summer to show like how smooth the things were, because the summer of 2020, like I explained to our neighbors when we had our meeting, it wasn't our clientele. We're a very family-oriented kind of place, and always been. And then all of a sudden, we're the only ones that had such a big outdoor space, and so you have people come from all the different townships, and some of them are not as nice and as polite as our union family. And that reflected, and that was something that I had a whole summer to show them, look, now this is our clientele, we're going to make sure there's no loud music, there's no people disrespecting your driveways, or like they said in the first meeting. And I think we did a good job in the whole summer to show like, we're back to being us. That was a very specific situation because of a pandemic that was completely out of our hands.
Okay. And then another, although minor, there was some concern about the rear and rodent control. I know that was discussed. If you could touch on the steps that now you've taken.
Yes. We always had a very good extermination company, but after they brought it to my attention, I'm like, because some of them, I don't know what happened outside, and I don't know even if it was related to our property, but more than ever, we have our company now. They do outside of the whole building, they do outside of the new building as well, and they actually cover even the mechanic shop to make sure there's nothing.
Okay. And then finally, and you provided all of the neighbors with your cell phone number, so if there's any issues that they have in the operation of I think both your phone number and your assistant's phone number, so they can contact you if they have any issues, somebody possibly blocking their driveway.
Yes, they do. They met both of my managers. I have two managers that run the place on a daily basis. They met both of them. They have their contacts as well as mine, and our emails, and all the contact. And we want to cooperate. Anything they need, we're there to be part of the community.
Okay. And again, if anyone needs his number that are here this evening, he can again provide it.
Yes, I have my cards here and it has my cell phone on it, so,
Okay, great.
yes.
And I know we'll have your other professionals testify, but I have no further direct questions for Rodrigo at this time. Thank you, Mr. Silva.
My pleasure.
Are there any board members that would like to question Mr. De Silva on the testimony he has given? Mr. De Silva, I have a question.
Yes.
You said you purchased the building across the street on the same side as your building. The
The
auto
Cantaloupe auction.
repair shop, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Is that going to remain an auto repair shop?
Honestly, we do have a lease there, but after the lease is over, actually, my plans would be to actually take over that space, because I do have partners on that property. I would take over the payment of the full mortgage and have that as a parking lot. I just, of course, when the time comes and when I go to the proper, channels to demolish everything that we have there and turn that into a parking lot, because the lease right now, it's just not working for us. Anthony even mentioned to me, Mr. Anthony, that right now he has some of the trucks there, some of the tow trucks, and it doesn't look good. It looks like a junkyard, and that's not the vision that we want next to our restaurant or even in our main street, so.
Because I heard you purchased that property, and I've been passing by there, and there isn't room to park one car. I mean, do you have, like Mr. Mangusa, I guess, said he had spoken to you.
Yes.
Tow trucks, and there was a dump truck, and the dump part of the truck was in the upright position the other day I passed there.
No, and the craziest thing is, I mentioned to the owner of the mechanic shop, and he said, "Oh, this is somebody that I know. I'm letting him park here." So it's not even like he's charging somebody, and he has all these trucks there. So it's something we're gonna definitely have to look into it, because it cannot stay that way. It doesn't even look good for my business, for the restaurant
Right.
next door. It doesn't look good. I'm sure, you know what I mean? I have my plants there, my little, but you cannot. It's still
No,
just not the vision that we want.
Okay, I agree with you.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, we can open it up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony of Mr. De Silva? Just his testimony. If you want to make a comment or you have a concern, we could wait to the end of the meeting and you can say whatever you want. But it's just the testimony he has given before this board.
Yes, hi, everybody. Angelique, can you hear me?
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Angelique Harris, 2016 Bless Avenue.
What was the first name?
Angelique,
Angelique?
yes, Lique,
Thank you. And what was the address?
2016 Bless Avenue.
Thank you.
So I do have a comment which I'll save for later, but my only question is, you said you're not going to renew the lease. Can you tell me when the lease is going to be up?
Well, when they first did, it was a 10-year lease, but at this point, there's 7 more years. But honestly, I don't think it's going to stay that long. I'm honestly trying to find a little glitch on that lease or something that we can, apply to get rid of that lease if possible, as soon as possible.
Okay, there's like no time frame or anything.
Well, 7 years now, but I really hope for less than that, because again, it's beneficial for all of us,
Yeah.
especially, you know what I mean, for the business right next door, and yes.
Okay, that's my only question.
No, thank you, and thank you again for coming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dolores Millette Brown, and I reside at 2009 High Street.
What was your last name?
Millette, M-A-L-L-E-T-T hyphen Brown.
Thank you.
Well, I do have a question. And thank you. I would like to thank you before I make this statement. After the meeting with the neighbors and everything, I only had to email one time to you and your manager because the music has not been played after 9 o'clock. So that's a beautiful thing. So, and that you are a man of your word.
Thank you.
However, the coming out of High Street, and the parking, you know, your delivery trucks are there. They park in the front, and I know you have a side gate because it's right next to my house where they can park there and take the packages in the doors. But there's constant trucks being parked there and constant parking of cars. And I don't see anybody from your restaurant coming out asking anyone to move. And I'm very active in and out because I'm a busy person. So that, I don't know, there's don't seem to be any change in that. 'Cause
You mean close to the corner or where
close to the
exactly?
corner, the left side, because it's very dangerous. If you have a truck or car and you're trying to make a
You mean
left
on
turn,
Stuyvesant going to High?
Stuyvesant.
Yes,
Stuyvesant, so someone coming out checking that?
yes.
All the neighbors are still complaining about the same thing. Nothing's changed. No one seems to be coming out asking anyone to move, and it's very blinding trying to get out to Stuyvesant Avenue from High Street or Glass Street.
No, I understand. And like we said before, we are working with the police department, and they promised that the same way they put a sign from High Street towards Stuyvesant, they're going to do the same on the other side now, from Stuyvesant going to High Street. And there's only so much we can do in a sense that we tell them not to park, and they look at us like, I don't see a sign. I can park here. And then it's a daily challenge that we have. We tell them, look, you're going to get a fine. You're not supposed to park here in the corner. And because we don't have that sign yet, but we are working closely with the police department to get a sign over and to get the yellow painted, because only the sign is not enough. Sometimes even on High Street, they still park there, and the sign is there. So we're actually going to get the yellow paint all around that corner, so they see not only the sign, but they see the yellow paint. So we're working with the police department to get that. And believe me, I can't wait. I can't wait.
No parking anytime, do you know?
There'll be no parking anytime, the whole corner, that whole L shape right there. So
Okay.
that's what we're working with, and believe me, I can't wait because of all of it.
And one other thing,
Yes.
Well, excuse me, if I may add something to the parking situation. Nothing would be done unless there was an approval. He's not approved yet, so no parking signs or any type of yellow painting of the curb, if that's something would not be done until there was an approval, because he's not yet approved yet, so that's why.
Thank you.
And my other suggestion to you would be, if somebody is parking there, maybe you call the police, you know, because it is the police do control the streets, you know.
It's good to know that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
one other thing.
Of course.
The parking across the street, you stated that when you're having special affairs, that you're going to have someone out to let everyone know that they can park across the street there.
Yes.
In all honesty, it's always a party there. It is always crowded. You do good business there. So there's always an overflow. Is there some way you maybe could put a sign on the building, the side of the building, to point to the parking, you know, across the street? Because seriously and honestly, you do well there. They love your food.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
And that's it.
No, thank you. Thank you. We're definitely going to work on that. Thank you so much.
Mr. De Silva, I just would like to reiterate on the sign on the building. Don't put anything on that building without approval from the zoning.
That's why nothing happened.
They
Yes,
have a strict
yes.
sign policy.
No,
But
of course, of course.
just check with us first.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to question this witness? Hearing none, Mr. Hale, would you like to
Yes,
continue?
thank you, Mr. Silva. I'd now like to call upon Paolo Dantes.
Excuse me.
Thanks again, Rodrigo.
Can I ask you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that any testimony you provide is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes,
And just state and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation?
sure. My name is Paulo Dantas, first name Paulo, last name Dantas, Dantas, owner of Dantas Correct, Architecture in Union, New Jersey.
And just for the record, you were also sworn in on the first appearance that we had virtually? And
That's correct.
offered some testimony?
I did offer
And you're still under
testimony.
oath this evening? Thank you.
Okay. And again, you've been previously qualified. Briefly, give your credentials to the board.
Sure. I'm a licensed architect since 2007. Been graduated from New Jersey Institute of Technology in 2002 with a Bachelor's of Architecture, and have testified to this board previously, and license is up to date.
Great.
We'll accept his credentials.
Great.
Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Dantas, I know there's very limited site items here, but if you could briefly take the board through the layout and the three properties that are involved in this application.
Sure. The existing property that we're actually discussing, Lagar, is located on 1252 Stuyvesant Avenue on the corner of High Street, located here. Right there. The property is approximately 11,864 square feet. It's located in a UCBD2 zone. The property consists of a one-story masonry building of approximately 5,000 square feet. The current use is a restaurant, and along with an accessory structure adjacent to the main building at the rear, used for storage. We are proposing that the existing temporary covered outdoor patio to be permanently a structure in which will occupy the front portion of 2,400 square feet, and the existing temporary covered outdoor patio is structurally independent from the main building structure. Also, we are proposing to provide additional parking at the adjacent of the property from Lagar Restaurants at the following properties. The first property is located at the corner of Stuyvesant and Glass Avenue, 1266 Stuyvesant Avenue, which consists of an existing mechanical facility. We describe it as parking lot A, and it currently has 24 parking spaces. The second property is located across the street from Lagar Restaurant. The address is 1263 Stuyvesant Avenue, which consists of an existing mixed-use building, 2 retail stores, and has 2 residential units above. We describe it in our plans as parking lot B, and we're proposing 26 parking spaces to be used as valet parking. The existing building floor plan consists of 2 dining areas, 2 office spaces. The kitchen has 2 areas of work, and it has a bar with some seating. It has 3 bathrooms, and the rest is storage. Based on our existing occupant load and the proposed cover outdoor patio, the occupant load with the existing toilet facilities are adequate and satisfactory as per the plumbing code. We do not propose any additional toilet facilities. The alterations will be made to the existing conditions to improve some egress path on the existing building along with the covered outdoor patio, and such addition as exit openings and paths and other renovations to the restaurant or interior appearances and some cosmetic design features. The existing temporary covered outdoor patio shall serve as a dining area to be used for a permanent structure, and the covered outdoor patio is to be used and intended to be used throughout the year. We are proposing during the warm seasons the outdoor covered area to be sheltered by a roof and open on all sides. During the colder seasons, we propose a lightweight and easily removable seasonal vinyl panel systems, and the functionality of these panels is primarily just to shelter the customers from the weather. The elevations of the existing building, it's pretty much stuck on masonry finish, painted with a neutral palette, and the covered patio is a post and beam construction with a shingle roof system. The client is proposing to enclose the cover outdoor patio during the colder season areas with a removable season panel system, as exampled here, which you can see is actually not thick at all. It has a thinness to it, perhaps like a quarter of an inch or so, and that's only just to shelter people from the weather.
And I know they're very minimal, if any, engineering comments, but you've had an opportunity to review the April 12th, 2022
Yeah.
letter from Colliers. Do you have any problem complying with any of the terms and conditions in the technical comments?
All of them will be compliant, yes.
Great, thank you. I have no further questions at this time. Mr. Dantes?
Are there any board members that would like to question Mr. Dantes on the testimony that was given?
Yeah, I just have one question, Mr. Chairman. On the parking, you said there's 24 spaces adjacent and 26 across the street?
That's correct. So
Okay,
we have
total
on,
of 50. You have any additional parking at all on the property that's there now?
on
the
Lagar's
bar?
property, we do
Yeah.
not. On the mechanical, we have actually existing 24 striped parking spaces, and then we're proposing the 26 across the street, which we believe once you do the valet, you could tandem park.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Are there any other board members that would like to question this witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I noticed there's a heater in the presentation. Is there going to be any heat in there on the wintertime?
That's correct.
And what type of heater are you going to be using?
Right now, I think we just have a heat exchange. I believe that's what we're calling out for.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dantes, me and you have been down this path with the heating system, so, we have to...
We will address all the concerns with the building. I think we are also, I believe we have talked in length about also making this building successful and meeting all the code requirements and fire ratings and all these things. And I think me and the client actually have been taking the initial steps. We've been meeting with a couple people in order to provide the separation that is required. Once we get all these numbers and all this lead times, then we'll address that with you.
That's fair enough. Also, you said something about shingles, the roof?
Roof.
Okay, the drainage. Where are we draining?
So currently, I think we just have a gutter system to
Okay.
the outside, and then we'll just have to find some type of just not dripping into the sidewalk. We might have to curb cut.
Yeah, because it would be
That's correct.
a real bad situation if we have that drip onto the sidewalk.
Of course,
You might
and
have to
then
come out
all
to
the
the
freezing.
street.
Yep,
So we may have to pull up a slab or two to drain from there,
yep, and
Out.
that's reasonable and
Okay.
common sense, yes.
just so we're on the same page.
Why don't we note that for the record, that
Sure.
it's subject to follow-up with the building department or engineering for drainage, and the other aspect of that, you're talking about the heat and whatever the standards would impose. The fire department as well, I remember his testimony the last time addressed suppression, and the fire department this time also raised late comments, I don't know if you saw them, but whatever the standards are
Yeah,
expected.
whatever's
Yeah,
required.
we
We
did
will do
see
it.
a comment for the outdoor. and
Or I saw it,
we-
I'm
Yes.
sorry, it was March 21st, it wasn't, I thought it was earlier, but.
Yeah, we did receive those, yes.
Are there any other board members that would like to question Mr. Dantes? Hearing none at this time, we'll open it up to the public again. Are there any members of the public that would like to question Mr. Dantes for the testimony he has given? Hearing none?
Yes, I'd like to briefly call upon Connor Hughes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Our traffic engineer to just briefly comment on essentially what's been explained with respect to
Mr.
the
Hughes, can I
traffic.
ask you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you can provide is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes,
If you could state and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation.
sure. My name's Connor Hughes, first name Connor, last name Hughes, Hughges. I'm a senior design engineer at Dynamic Traffic LLC in Chester, New Jersey.
And you did not testify at the original hearing?
No, I did not.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Hughes, if you could just briefly give your credentials to the board, please.
Sure. So I'm a New Jersey licensed professional engineer. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from NJIT in 2017, and I've been practicing traffic engineering for about 5 years, in which time I've prepared hundreds of traffic impact studies, numerous of which were for similar uses.
The board will accept his
Great.
credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Hughes, if you could briefly provide your traffic and parking analysis with respect to this facility.
Certainly. So as you've heard from the prior testimony, essentially what we're proposing to do here is just permanently enclose that outdoor seating area, which has been there for the last couple of years. No additional seating is being added, so essentially the existing operations as they are with regards to parking, trip generation, et cetera, would remain currently as they are today. I know there's a lot of talk of the sight lines and the visibility at the intersection of High Street and Stuyvesant Avenue. I did take a cursory look at that, and again, as we testified prior, that corner, we intend on striping that out with yellow paint as well as putting no parking signs in those locations in order to prohibit anybody from parking in those areas and limiting the sight distance coming out of High Street to Stuyvesant Avenue. And the structure itself will also not protrude into that sight triangle, and visibility will be adequate per AASHTO standards at that intersection. Now, as far as the parking, ordinance requires 75. That was confirmed in the review letter in April. As we've mentioned, we have the adjacent repair shop that we have 24 spaces, and then the property across the street with 26, total of 50 off-site spaces. And on top of that, there's also public parking available just across High Street on the opposite corner, which that lot has 28 spaces. So even in the event that the off-site areas that we're providing were filled, there's public facilities that could accommodate those vehicles, as well as on-street parking along Stuyvesant Avenue and a few along High Street. And then by adding this lot across the street, as we've talked about, adds an additional parking feature that hasn't been part of the restaurant previously and will only help to aid any parking situations that happen with the restaurant. And that pretty much sums it up. You know, yeah,
Great.
is there anything
And
else?
from a traffic standpoint, I don't think there was anything raised, but again, no issues with the April 12, 2022 Collier's review letter?
Correct, no objections there.
Great. Thank you very much. I have no further questions of Mr. Hughes at this time.
Are there any board members that would like to question Mr. Hughes at this time? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony of Mr. Hughes? Hearing none, Mr. Hale, you have any more witnesses?
Yes, I'd like to now call upon our professional planner, who is Elizabeth Waterbury. I know you're usually used to seeing Mr. Nicholas Graviano, but he's not available this evening, and Libby has kindly stepped in.
Good
Can I
evening,
ask you to
everyone.
swear or affirm that the testimony you provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, it is.
For the record, if you could just state and spell your name with your business affiliation.
Sure, Elizabeth Waterbury, everybody knows me as Libby, of EM Waterbury and Associates. I'm the president and founder of that company since 1994. I am a professional planner. I'm also a professional engineer. I have been both for over 30 years, I hate to say. And I am the planner for the zoning board for the city of Long Branch. I'm also the planner for the borough of West Long Branch in Monmouth County. I've provided testimony throughout the state, both in capacity as a planner and also as an engineer. I just don't go below exit 2 on the turnpike, but I do go up to Blairstown and to Mawa. So,
We'll accept her credentials, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Waterbury, if you've heard the testimony here this evening, we're obviously a permitted use in the Union Center Business 2 District. Provide your planning analysis for the relief being sought in connection with this application.
sure, as it was already described to you what the application is, I'm not going to look to reiterate all of that. We do know that this covered patio was put in place during COVID. One of the things that's very beneficial of this particular lot, because we always have to look at these as it relates to a specific property, is that in many instances when that occurred in, my office used to be in the Red Bank area, which is a very similar kind of downtown as Union. Lots of times those kinds of seating had to spill out onto the sidewalks, and this property was very fortunate to have very specific opportunity to be able to provide it on the site as well. As we've seen along the way, that the outdoor dining in many instances is here to stay for a number of reasons. Number one, I think everybody kind of liked it. I think it also shows that when you have the outdoor dining that's very visible like that, it adds to a very vibrant downtown environment. And I think what we're also finding too is that one of the things that was in your master plan is that we're looking to deal with sustainability and resilience and being able to have, we all have to be very flexible these days, kind of be able to move at a dime from doing it one way to another way. And I think that having these facilities become more of a permanent measure, besides adding to the vibrancy of your downtown, also allows for that resilience to occur for your businesses and also for your residents over in time. So I just want to just add that as a little different aspect of it. We have a number of existing conditions that are in a variant type of condition. All of our variants are C variances in nature. We are not looking for a use variance, even though we're here before you. We're here for the C variances, which relate more to a balancing of the positive and negative criteria. The existing variances on the property is we have a minimum lot area of 12,500 is required, and we are at 11,864, again, an existing condition. We have an existing condition of a side yard setback with 5 feet is required, and existing we have 0.87 feet. We have a minimum lot width where the zone would require 125 feet, and we're at 100 feet. These are all existing conditions that cannot be altered. We also have the scenario where your ordinance requires one loading space, and there's not a location on this particular site to have one. There's not one existing. And we also have where the ordinance requires a 25-foot buffer between the backs of these buildings and the residential lots that are to the rear. We are in the, as you know, the UCBD2 zone, and just behind us is a RA residential zone. So between those two, there's a 25-foot transitional landscape buffer that would be required. And we have basically no buffer, and this condition's existed, since the time of these two uses being adjacent to each other. I would offer to you that these particular reliefs can be granted under a C1 type of criteria, where we're looking at, by some kind of reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the specific piece of property, that they would exist, and also by reason of an extraordinary and exceptional situation affecting a specific property or structural lawfully thereon. And all these things, we're not looking really to change anything that would alter these particular existing conditions of the lot or conditions of the building. So in the instance where strict application of any regulations would result in particular and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional and undue hardship upon the developer of the property, to try to alleviate these particular conditions would be fall under that aspect of the regulations. So our existing conditions that have existed on the site are not augmented by this application, but it will offer that they've existed for a long time and there's no substantial impairment of the zone plan or the zoning ordinance due to them existing. You have a commercial zone that has been against a residential zone for, going back through your master plans, through the history of those particular master plans. But then we have proposed variances that come with this particular application that's in the front. And we have, as it was mentioned before, we have the requirements of the off-street parking. The traffic engineer went through in that in quite a bit of detail, where he had noted that 75 were required and 50 parking spaces are being provided, which is an improvement through the course of this particular application, an improvement that's been introduced, particularly with the Lot 4 across the street being included to this application, which before there was, once that shelter was put on there, there was no parking on this site at all. We have an accessory building separation. Accessory buildings in non-residential districts are not allowed to be closer to another structure than the height of the taller structure, but in no event closer than 15 feet. Well, we're at 0, okay, because we're right up against, if you're looking at our structure of the roof and then the seasonal enclosure that is right up against the existing building. So we have that relief that would be looking, and that accessory structures in non-residential districts shall conform to all the yard requirements for principal buildings, and a 5-foot front yard setback is required in this particular zone, and we have 0 there too. But I will offer to you that when you go along the whole frontage there, all the commercial buildings are basically right up against the back of the sidewalk. So in a sense, it's not inconsistent with what's existing in your commercial zones, both in that area and then further away. We have a parking aisle width requirement. Your ordinance requires 24 feet. On Lot 4, there's 11.95 in the area where they're looking to do the valet parking. And on Lot 4, there's a 20-foot aisle width. So that's one of the reliefs that we've requested. Parking stall size, your ordinance requires the parking stalls be 20 feet in length. The residential site improvement standards don't apply here, obviously, but they kind of put out a standard of 9 by 18. That's a pretty regular standard, and they're looking to have their spaces be the 18 feet in length as well, too. And then the last is the parking lot pavement, where your code requires that the parking areas be paved, and 16 of the spaces that are shown on Lot 4, which would be in the rear of Lot 4, are on a grassed area, and in the report it was noted if the applicant would be willing to put a permeable paver surface in there so that the water could still go through it, but that it would be a more solid surface, and the applicant has indicated to me he would be willing to do that. So when we're looking at these C2 variances, I noted that we're looking at this as a very specific piece of property for this particular use. And I would offer that there's purposes of the municipal land use law and your master plan that are advanced. I have 2 to offer to you. One is to encourage a municipal action to guide appropriate use or development in all lands in a manner that will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. And I think that the outdoor seating is in response to the pandemic. And in that, we are finding, number one, that we had to deal with the safety of having open air and having separation. We also had to deal with a way to have resiliency for our businesses, both of which are in your master plans. And that now we're also, to help with that safety and general welfare, that we're providing the additional parking by acquiring the lot across the street. I want to just say that one of the others is to promote sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of commercial uses. And that's what we're basically doing. We're providing the outdoor seating. Luckily, it's in the front, but it's also on this property. It's not spilling over onto your sidewalks as it is in many other restaurants that may not have that particular area in front of them, and that we are looking to expand the parking to meet the needs of the restaurant. And you know, from a planning perspective, it's a good civic design, an arrangement to provide a healthy and vibrant streetscape. And I think that having this along the edge of the street also helps to do that. So just in summary, I wanted to indicate that I believe and offer to you that the benefits of the deviation from the zoning ordinance, from the things I had mentioned to you, outweigh any of the detriments, that there's no substantial impairment of the zone plan, and that it advances the goals of the master plan and strengthens the commercial corridor through investment and employment opportunities, and also, as noted in your master plan adopted 3/25/2021, which I found was interesting, was being done in the middle of this pandemic, that it was speaking about the resiliency and sustainable practices, and it's incorporating that. I would also offer that there's no substantial impairment of the zoning ordinance, and in saying that the UCBD2 zone is shown as having a purpose to create a zoning district that provides an appropriate transition between the development patterns present in the regular UCBD zone and the BB zones. And I want to indicate that this project conforms with that goal.
Great, great job, thank you, Ms. Waterbury. I have no further planning questions at this time.
Are there any members of the board that would like to question Ms. Waterbury's testimony?
Yeah, I do have a question concerning the variance on the setback. If that variance is granted and it goes to sight distance from, to someone trying to make a left-hand turn going north on Stuyvesant, does that affect the sight distance now that they have to move up a little bit further and potentially cause a safety hazard for people walking across the street?
Why don't I have the traffic
I'm
engineer
just
come
gonna
up and
recall
address that?
Mr. Hughes for a sec.
Okay.
That's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, very good question. The setback, as it would stand, does not protrude into what would be labeled as the AASHTO site distance. AASHTO sets the standards for how it's calculated and laid out.
Why don't you tell them what AASHTO is? Do you
Sorry?
know? AASHTO.
Oh, sorry. So AASHTO is, they set forth all the design standards for roadway design, geometric design, things of that nature. So it's essentially the gold standard in terms of traffic design. And they set forth all the site distance lengths based on speed limits on the roadways, and how the site triangles should be laid out. And based on those standards, it's 14 and a half feet back from the travelway. In this instance, that would be from the edge of the parking lane and then back to High Street. And when you draw a line from that point down to Stuyvesant Avenue, the building is outside of that triangle that it makes, so it wouldn't protrude any site distance in that sense.
With the corner of the proposed temporary structure?
Right, right, correct.
Great question, though, thank you.
Can
Thanks,
I
Tom.
ask, just to be clear, the permeable pavers are going to address the variance for the grass area? That will satisfy the ordinance, as far as you understand? The permeable pavers, or is it just a better option than the grass? I mean, is that,
I think it was a request in one of your review letters.
I know he noted the grass, and I'm just wondering, and as I don't know the answer, as I sit.
Or a permeable surface, whether it's pavers or some kind of permeable, so that the
Okay,
water.
so we're addressing that variance that way.
Correct.
Whether it cures it totally
Right.
or not will be subject to further engineering review.
Correct,
But it is an upgrade nonetheless off the grass.
correct.
So it's meeting the intent of
Right.
the request, but also at the same time addressing the concerns for stormwater, because it will go right through it.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any other board members with questions for Ms. Waterbury? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like to question Ms. Waterbury's testimony? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment or express their opinion? They can come forward. Yes.
Can you give my name again?
If you could, yeah, for the record.
Angelique Harris, 2016 Bless Avenue.
Thank you.
So my comment is basically the parking situation, which I've discussed with Rodrigo a few times. 50 parking spaces isn't enough, in my opinion. I'm not a traffic planner, but I am a resident, and I see the cars come down my street every day, turn around in our driveways, and then park on our street and walk around the corner. Today, my husband came home. He had to park off of High Street, and we live on Gless Avenue. That's how crowded it was. So when we walked to go get his car before we came here, we walked around by the adjacent property. There's nothing but tow trucks in there, and the dump truck that you mentioned is still there. And that's why I asked Rodrigo, when does he plan on pushing out? I don't want to say it like that, but that's a big deal, because If that's 24 spaces, and then you have 26 across the street, but that's only valet, I just don't see enough parking spaces. And it impacts me because I never have a place, I have a driveway, but then we got to shift around and move cars, multiple drivers in the house. That's my biggest concern, the parking. And I said it to you before, and I said it to Mr. Heil. I just wanted you guys to hear that again. Thank you, guys.
Angelique, just to address your concerns, I will send property maintenance out there to take a look at that property with all the dump trucks and everything else. I will send inspectors out there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.
And that could be the vehicle with which you use your ability as the landowner to address that situation. If his use of the property is not compliant, then obviously a complaint could be registered through you as the owner or through the public, through the building department. Because if it's not being used properly, then we can address that.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment or express their concern? Hearing none. Mr. Hale, would you like to sum up?
Yes, just briefly. We appreciate the board and the board professionals' comments. We appreciate the public coming out this evening, and again, we've had the opportunity to meet with them. I think it's all been said in the testimony here. I think the commitment of Mr. De Silva to meeting with the residents and addressing the concerns. Obviously, one of the concerns that was echoed here again is the mechanic facility next door, and working with the township, both the police and Mr. Manguso, hopefully alleviating that problem. Certainly the addition, as I say, the parking was extremely limited even before the addition of the outdoor seating area, but the covered outdoor seating area. But now with the property across the street, whether it be used in conjunction with valet and otherwise, certainly provides additional off-street parking, and implementing the operational improvements that Rodrigo has agreed to. Having this certainly is a great use within the Union Center Business 2 district or even the Union Center Business District, and we feel that the commitment that the applicant has made and the testimony that's been provided justify the relief that we're seeking. So we look forward to the board granting this application and having the facility continue to operate on a year-round basis. So thank you again. Great to see you all in person.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. All right, at this time, I believe we can conference this. Ms. Martins, would you like to begin?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had my concerns in regards to this when you guys first came in front of the board. I appreciate that you met with the residents to address the parking spaces. After hearing the testimony today, I do think that the parking concerns have been addressed. My only concern is that you work on the property on Gluss Avenue to make sure that 24 parking spaces are available should your customers need it. So I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Ms. Alexander?
Yes, and I'd like to say I'm happy to be back and very happy to see all of you in person. But I too, like Ms. Martins, I just want to say that Mr. Hughes, Mr. Dantes, Ms. Waterbury, your testimonies were very good and defended the proposal, but I think the person that defended it best was Mr. De Silva. You're right. You want to give people the option, the outdoor, indoor feel. It's more comfortable to be outside. Like Ms. Martin said, you met with the neighbors on December the 6th, and you actually gave them something that's very hard. You gave them your cell phone numbers and your email addresses so that they can contact you. You stated how you're willing to comply with all the building codes. And as Ms. Waterbury said, it was hard during COVID to be to sustain and to be resilient, and you've been able to do that at a wonderful place. I hear a lot about it. I feel that the benefits outweigh the deficits, and I will definitely be voting yes for this project.
Mr. Benavenga?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My biggest concern was with the neighbors. Based on Rodrigo's testimony, it sounds like he has a good rapport with all the neighbors. You give us your email and your phone numbers. I think that's a positive impact for this application. With that said, I'm going to vote yes.
Ms. Scott?
Good evening, everyone. I too have some concerns about the parking. I was listening intently about the parking. I hope that the commitment does come through for the additional parking, because even when you go out to have dinner and just have an enjoyable time, you want to have reliable and safe parking. You want to be able to go out and come back and find your car intact. So, and then I also listened to, the young lady that spoke about her driveways and cars all on, I think that's important that you find parking. People don't want to come home from a long day's work and have to ride around the block to try to find parking here or there, or have to come back out once your establishment is closed to get parking for where they live at. So I'm hopeful that you will address that, because you appear to be somebody that's been consistent with your neighbors and had communications. And you don't get a lot of business owners. They come into, business for their business. It's not really about community. Giving out your cell phone number and an email address, that's important. That's saying a lot to some people that, I'm a team player. So I will also be voting yes, but I do hope that you take advantage of the fact that you own the property, and if there's violations there, that you look to the appropriate people to make sure that they get addressed. Thank you.
Mr. McNeil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At first glance, I did have some technical questions and some concerns, but all those concerns were addressed, both in testimony and in question. Glad to hear that the owner is very, very proactive. That can be a curse and a blessing. But it's something that's necessary if you want to satisfy the concerns of your neighbor. So I will be voting yes.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. As for myself, based on the application...
I don't get a chance to talk.
Oh, Mr. Wiley,
Yes,
I forgot you?
you did.
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have to agree with my colleagues. I have no problem with this project. I think it's a good project. I see where there's nothing detrimental to the area. The owner, he seems to want to alleviate any problems or concerns that the neighbors may have. My biggest concern was the parking as well as the loud music that we were concerned about, and I don't see that that's going to be a problem. He seems to be willing to work with the neighbors, and any problems that come up, he's going to try to solve them. And I think all the testimony was done very well, and I think that the positives outweigh the negatives in this project, and I'm going to definitely vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. As for myself, I had a lot of concerns, just like my fellow board members. But based on the testimony given to the board this evening, I believe the applicant has proved and justified both the positive and the negative criteria associated with this application. I'm going to vote yes for the application. However, let the record show that the applicant has agreed to the conditions stated in the engineering report and Mr. Hale's letter dated April 13th, 2022. Like I said, I vote yes for this application. I just have one comment. Our board attorney, Mr. Pansula, who's sitting to my left, he always stresses to board members that we have to be good neighbors. This isn't the first situation that we had like this. He stresses it every meeting. I just hope in the future that Mr. De Silva and the neighbors on Glass Avenue and High Street and Stuyvesant Avenue and other surrounding streets can continue to rectify any problems that come up. And I'm glad you gave your cell phone number. A lot of people do not do that. A lot of people promise things and they don't come through. To be a good neighbor, both neighbors have to comply. So I just hope that continues, and good luck to you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add something. Ms. Harris, you always have recourse by calling the building department, and I will send property maintenance out there or speak to Rodrigo myself. Okay?
And just, I compliment Mr. Champy recognizing me, because I do raise that a lot when the commercial sites border residential areas. These are tricky, difficult cases. You also have the ability, any of the neighbors, if they don't adhere to these resolution conditions that are being memorialized tonight, you also have the ability to call Mr. Mangusa's office, because there are they are enforceable. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Thank you. That was honorable, the way that went in. It was a good application.
Motion to grant the application.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the variance applicable to this application and that council is directed to prepare a resolution consistent with the board's decision.
Second.
Mr. Manguso?
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Ms. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Bentavegana?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. McNeil?
Yes.
And Mr. Champion?
Yes.
May 11th, Steve, we don't have a meeting on May 4th. so
That's
it'll be May
fine.
11th,
Thank
the
you very
resolution
much.
date.
And again, thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you to the neighbors, and again, great to see everybody in person.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Mr.
May
Chair,
I- Okay.
Mr. Chairman, there being no further business to come before us, the board this evening, I move that we adjourn, I'm sorry, this meeting.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.